12-inch German shells punch through 9 inches of British armor. Cordite charges ignite. Flash fire races down ammunition hoists at 7,000 feet per second. The British battlecruiser HMS Queen Mary, all 26,350 tons, vanishes in a column of flame under the North Sea. It's May 31st, 1916, and the Germans seem to be pulling off a desperate and masterful last gambit, luring the British Grand Fleet into a trap and breaking it with concentrated firepower. British Vice Admiral David Beatty can only watch as his fleet disintegrates, muttering, quote, "There seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today." Yet, even as Beatty turns his ships to run, Room 40, one of Britain's most secret weapons, is not far behind, and it's ready for the Germans to make a deadly mistake. Radio chatter. In the shadowy corridors of London's Admiralty, Room 40 housed Britain's most potent secret weapon. Behind locked doors, naval cryptographers captured German radio signals day and night. Morse code crackled through receivers. The key breakthrough came from disaster and luck. In 1914, the German cruiser Magdeburg ran aground in Russian waters. Russian sailors recovered her cipher books before the Germans could destroy them. That single event gave the Allies a priceless edge. By May 1916, British intelligence could decode most German naval traffic, sometimes faster than the Germans themselves. As radio chatter surged that month, Room 40's staff sensed something momentous approaching. Messages hinted at massive fuel allocations, munition stockpiling, and fleet movements across the North Sea. When a high-priority signal arrived on May 30th for Karl Friedrich Heinrich Reinhard Scheer, Admiral of the Kaiserliche Marine, British cryptographers reacted instantly. Within hours, their translation was on the desk of Admiral of the Fleet, John Rushworth Jellicoe. Scheer's plan was audacious. With just 16 dreadnoughts against 28 British battleships, he couldn't win a straight fight. Instead, he'd lure British forces with a coastal raid, scatter them with U-boat ambushes, then crush the fragments with concentrated firepower. Throughout May, submarines had taken position near British naval bases, waiting for a single coded word to spring the trap. But the trap was already exposed. British codebreakers had laid bare the German strategy. Jellicoe read the intelligence on May 30th, trusted it completely, and acted without hesitation. By dusk, the Grand Fleet was at sea. 16 dreadnoughts slipping from Scapa Flow, while 8 more steamed south from Cromarty. His orders were direct: block every German exit from the Skagerrak and force them into decisive battle. A crowded stretch of sea. Before dawn on May 31st, Admiral Hipper led 5 German battlecruisers northwest from the Yad estuary at 16 knots. Fast, long-range, and bristling with firepower, these warships were built to hit hard and move quickly. 30 torpedo boats hugged their flanks, ready to strike with coordinated, high-speed attacks. Hipper's task was to draw out the British vanguard, strike quickly, fall back, and pull enemy ships toward the guns of the main fleet. Hours later, Admiral Scheer advanced behind him with the High Seas Fleet, 16 modern dreadnoughts in 3 divisions. These armored giants, guided by advanced rangefinders, hurled 1-ton shells with lethal precision. 6 older pre-dreadnoughts followed in support, slower but still packing heavy guns. To the north, the British Grand Fleet steamed southward in force. Admiral Jellicoe commanded 24 dreadnoughts and 3 battlecruisers, reinforced by 8 armored cruisers, 12 light cruisers, and more than 50 destroyers. His aim was simple: bring the bulk of the German fleet into range and crush it in a single overwhelming blow. A full salvo from his line could unleash over 330,000 pounds of explosives, nearly triple the weight the Germans could answer with. South of Jellicoe, Vice Admiral Beatty led the fast wing, 6 battlecruisers and 4 Queen Elizabeth-class battleships with 15-inch guns. Designed for speed and reach, his formation was the Grand Fleet spear point, tasked with making first contact and steering the enemy toward Jellicoe's guns. 14 light cruisers and 27 destroyers swept ahead, hunting for signs of the enemy. Beatty also brought an edge the Germans lacked: the seaplane carrier Engadine. Her short Type 184 float planes could spot far beyond the horizon, adjusting fire in real time, a powerful turning point in long-range gunnery. By early afternoon, over 250 warships and more than 100,000 men were barreling toward the same stretch of sea. First shots. The underwater war began first before dawn. German submarines, barely visible beneath gray swells, pro-British patrol lines in tense encounters. U-32, cruising 80 miles east of the Isle of May, fed intelligence to Berlin that seemed to confirm Scheer's hopes. Scattered British movements suggested isolated targets ripe for destruction. But submarines weren't the only unseen threat. Both fleets carried hidden weapons. British battleships mounted up to 5 submerged torpedo tubes with 18-inch warheads. German dreadnoughts carried even more, 5 or 6 each, with reloads ready. If the fleets closed to short range, these underwater strikes could prove decisive. That afternoon, Beatty's battlecruisers steamed east in 3 columns, crews at action stations, batteries loaded with armor-piercing shells. Rangefinders swept empty seas, while fog concealed Hipper's approaching force on an intersecting course. At 2 p.m., fate intervened in the form of a Danish merchant steamer, stalled in the water with engine trouble. British and German scout cruisers closed in from opposite directions, each wary that the neutral ship might signal their presence. The first shots of Jutland came not from mighty dreadnoughts, but from cruisers investigating that stranded freighter. German torpedo boats, caught inspecting the vessel, backed toward Hipper's covering force. British light cruisers pursued, opening fire with 6-inch guns as steel began flying across the North Sea. Minutes later, German return fire shattered British decks. Beatty responded to the gunfire. His battlecruisers swung southeast in a sweeping turn, keels cutting deep at 30 knots as they surged toward battle. His goal was textbook: isolate and destroy Hipper's scouts before German reinforcements could arrive. In a historic first, Beatty ordered Engadine to launch a short 184 float plane for aerial spotting. The aircraft located German cruisers, but radio interference garbled its critical report at the worst possible moment. Signal confusion then crippled British coordination. Beatty's turn order failed to reach the attached Queen Elizabeth battleships, who continued north, falling 10 miles behind just when their 15-inch guns were desperately needed. Visibility now favored the Germans. Their gunners clearly saw British tripod masts silhouetted against the bright western sky, while Beatty's lookouts peered into dark eastern haze. This contrast gave Hipper's fire control a decisive early advantage. At 4 p.m., the range closed to 15,000 yards. Hipper opened fire, hoping to draw Beatty southeast toward Scheer's approaching battle line, then crush the British in a perfectly laid trap. German salvos landed with growing accuracy, green dye marking near misses, as range corrections flowed through disciplined fire control. Beatty inexplicably withheld fire for over 10 critical minutes, despite holding range and numerical superiority. The delay allowed German gunners to lock in their targets, while British ships weaved desperately to avoid tightening salvo patterns. When the British finally responded, smoke obscured their view, and inconsistent signals prevented coordinated fire. German gunnery was proving ruthlessly effective, and Scheer's trap was closing exactly as planned. Something wrong with our ships today. Within 20 minutes, concentrated fire bracketed HMS Indefatigable, shells smashing through her forward turret and igniting charges. Only the turret officer's final order to flood the magazines prevented a catastrophic explosion that would have consumed over 1,000 men. Moments later, HMS Queen Mary took several hits near her forward magazines. The resulting blast sent a towering column of fire and wreckage skyward, visible for miles across the North Sea. Over 1,000 sailors perished instantly. Only 2 survivors were found hours later among drifting oil and debris. Hope flickered briefly as the Queen Elizabeth-class battleships finally came into range. Their 8 15-inch guns apiece opened with crushing salvos that tore into German armor, evening the odds. But German fire remained lethally accurate, continuing to pound Beatty's battered force. Then came the blow that nearly broke British morale. Barely 25 minutes after Queen Mary's destruction, HMS Indefatigable exploded under concentrated crossfire. A shell punched deep and triggered both forward magazines, lifting her bow skyward in a massive blast. Only 9 of her crew survived. Amid smoke and carnage, observers mistook another damaged ship for sinking, prompting Beatty's bitter observation, quote, "There seems to be something wrong with our bloody ships today." The ship survived, but the frustration captured the brutal punishment his force was enduring. Then, British scouts delivered the warning that changed everything. Through smoke and mist, they spotted the approaching bulk of the High Seas Fleet. Shear's dreadnoughts were closing fast. Beatty suddenly saw the trap for what it was. His battered force was about to face the full weight of the German Navy. Single-file deployment. Beatty ordered his shattered force to execute a fighting withdrawal, a hard 180-degree turn north toward Jellicoe's approaching dreadnoughts. The maneuver succeeded under heavy fire, but signal failures struck again. The 5th Battle Squadron, still miles astern, received no clear instructions. Unaware of Beatty's turn, the 4 Queen Elizabeths steamed directly toward Shear's main fleet. From 5 p.m. onward, they bore the full fury of German gunnery, taking hits from both Hipper's battlecruisers and Shear's advancing dreadnoughts. Their thick armor held magnificently. Shell after shell slammed into belts and turrets, but the ships maintained formation and kept firing. Their return fire was punishing. 18 hits scored across multiple German vessels, several badly damaged, struggling to keep pace. The Queen Elizabeths had bought precious time, but at enormous cost. Meanwhile, Jellicoe dispatched the 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron to reinforce Beatty. These fresh ships raced southeast at maximum speed, intercepting German light cruisers attempting to disrupt British scouts. One enemy vessel was crippled, but continued firing torpedoes even while immobilized. As British forces converged through worsening visibility, the fighting intensified. Destroyers and cruisers maneuvered frantically to screen the battle line, dodging shell fire and each other as the range to the enemy fleet closed with frightening speed. As evening shadows lengthened across the North Sea, Admiral Jellicoe faced the most critical decision of his career. The Grand Fleet remained in cruising formation, 6 columns of 4 dreadnoughts each, efficient for movement but useless in combat. He needed to deploy a single battle line, but the direction would determine whether Britain achieved triumph or suffered disaster. Jellicoe had stark choices. Deploying westward would bring him closer to the Germans, gaining precious time before darkness fell, but risked exposing his fleet mid-maneuver to concentrated enemy fire. Deploying eastward was safer. He could cross the T, silhouetting German ships against the sunset while keeping his own hidden in eastern gloom. But it might give Shear time to escape. The fleets were converging rapidly. Deployment would take 20 minutes of vulnerability. A single mistake could mean missing the enemy entirely or engaging a crippling disadvantage. The convergence. Jellicoe signaled eastward deployment, a decision later hailed as one of the most precisely timed in naval warfare history. As Hipper's battered battlecruiser rejoined Shear's main line, the High Seas Fleet pressed north, completely unaware that Jellicoe's full battle line was sweeping down from the northwest like an avalanche of steel. German eyes remained fixed on smaller forces to the north and east, utterly blind to the trap about to close around them. The convergence nearly led to a British catastrophe. Beatty's battlecruisers were maneuvering across the Grand Fleet's van when armored cruisers suddenly crossed their path. The convergence of British formations created a dangerous traffic jam. Light cruisers and destroyers converged from all directions under heavy fire, many passing within yards of each other in a confused melee that could have crippled the Grand Fleet before it even engaged. HMS Defense, lured toward a burning German wreck, brought her squadron into the combined fire of Hipper's and Shear's guns. Heavy salvos struck in quick succession, and she exploded with all 903 crew. No survivors. Her sister ship was badly hit in the same engagement, but escaped when a nearby British battleship suffered steering failure, circling out of control and inadvertently drawing German fire away. Around 6:15 p.m., Hitler's reformed battlecruisers opened fire on the fresh 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron. Early British gunnery was accurate. Several German ships took damaging hits. The tide seemed to be turning when disaster struck with familiar, terrible swiftness. A German shell pierced HMS Invincible's midship turret and ignited a flash fire that reached her magazines. The explosion obliterated the flagship in seconds, vanishing in a towering column of flame and debris that marked her grave in under 90 seconds. Of over 1,000 aboard, just 6 were rescued from the wreckage. 15 minutes later, the defining moment arrived. British and German main fleets engaged directly for the only time in history. Jellicoe had executed the classic maneuver. He crossed the T. The Grand Fleet now steamed broadside across the head of the German line, bringing every gun to bear, while the Germans could reply with only their forward turrets. It was the position every admiral trained for. Overwhelming firepower with the fewest risks. The trap was sprung. Scheer had sailed straight into it. Sea of Fire. Emerging from mist and smoke like gray ghosts, German dreadnoughts were stunned to find the full British battle line deployed ahead. Ships they hadn't known were even at sea. Scheer later described the horrifying scene, quote, "From north to east was a sea of fire, the flash from the muzzles of the enemy guns being seen distinctly through the mist, though the ships themselves were not distinguishable." British firepower was overwhelming. Jellicoe's flagship alone scored 7 hits in the opening minutes. Though only 10 of his 24 dreadnoughts could initially engage, their coordinated salvos dealt crushing damage to the German van, systematically dismantling Scheer's carefully planned offensive. Recognizing the danger, Scheer ordered Gefechtsgeldwendung, a simultaneous 180-degree fleet reversal executed with remarkable discipline under the heaviest fire imaginable. The High Seas Fleet vanished into the haze, battered but intact, leaving British gunners firing at empty water. Jellicoe, suspecting submarine ambush, held back. Caution vindicated when German destroyers launched 31 torpedoes in covering their fleet's retreat. 1 British dreadnought was hit but remained afloat, a testament to superior damage control. Then Scheer made his boldest move. Knowing he couldn't escape at a stern chase, he ordered another sharp 180-degree turn, sending his fleet back toward Jellicoe's in a desperate final gambit to disrupt British plans before nightfall claimed the sea. He later wrote, quote, "The maneuver would be bound to surprise the enemy and facilitate the breaking loose at night." At 7:15 p.m., British scouts regained contact, and Jellicoe crossed Scheer's T for a devastating second time. This renewed engagement was even more punishing. British fire was concentrated and accurate, while German return fire proved largely ineffective against superior armor and positioning. Scheer again ordered retreat, but the maneuver faltered under intense punishment. German squadrons began losing formation as individual ships veered to evade incoming shells, threatening the cohesion that had saved them earlier. To buy precious time, Scheer ordered his remaining battlecruisers on a desperate charge into the British line. With Hipper still aboard a torpedo boat, the battlecruisers advanced without their commander, guns blazing through a storm of fire from 18 British dreadnoughts in a display of kamikaze courage. The sacrifice worked, but at a horrific cost. All but 1 German battlecruiser was hit repeatedly. The flagship lost 2 turrets and absorbed 14 heavy shells. Yet the battered ships held long enough for the rest of the German fleet to slip away under smoke and gathering darkness. For the next 24 minutes, British dreadnoughts dodged dozens of torpedoes launched by retreating German destroyers, their wakes visible in the fading light as they passed within yards of vital targets. With nightfall approaching, Jellicoe made a decision. Knowing British ships lacked night-fighting training and were vulnerable to torpedo attack in darkness, he chose to maintain contact until dawn, when visibility would again favor Britain's superior numbers and firepower. The decision would prove both wise and tragically flawed. Nocturnal retreat. Jellicoe moved to block Scheer's retreat, positioning the Grand Fleet across expected escape routes while screening with cruisers and destroyers. But poor intelligence and night combat confusion allowed the High Seas Fleet to evade interception and head for the protective minefields guarding their bases. the night erupted in confused, violent skirmishes between German ships and British destroyers. 7 separate engagements flared across the dark waters, but catastrophic communication failures meant Jellicoe remained unaware of the German fleet's actual course. Gunfire repeatedly erupted behind the British line, but Jellicoe dismissed it as minor destroyer action, missing his best chance for a decisive victory. Both sides launched desperate torpedo attacks. A British destroyer flotilla sank a German pre-dreadnought with all 839 crew, but lost 5 vessels to enemy fire and collision. Chaos in the darkness led to multiple rammings as ships mistook friend for foe. HMS Black Prince, an armored cruiser that had lost contact earlier, stumbled into the German battle line, thinking they were British ships. German battleships destroyed her at point-blank range in less than 5 minutes. All 857 aboard went down with the ship. Most tragically, British intelligence failures compounded the missed opportunities. Room 40 intercepted accurate German radio signals, including one giving Scheer's exact course, but conflicting earlier reports had made Jellicoe distrustful. Critical intercepts were ignored by staff officers who failed to grasp their vital importance. By 4 a.m. on June 1st, when Jellicoe finally received clear intelligence, Scheer's fleet had already cleared the minefields and reached safety. The window for decisive victory had closed in the confusion of one chaotic night. A New York newspaper captured the battle's outcome, quote, "The German fleet has assaulted its jailer, but it is still in jail." Across the Atlantic, both sides claimed victory. Germany withheld key losses and declared success, prompting national celebrations and parades. In Britain, early reports, many based on German broadcasts, suggested defeat. Returning crews found rumors had reached their families, and some faced jeers from crowds who believed the Royal Navy had failed. The raw numbers seemed to support German claims. Britain lost more, over 113,000 tons of ships and 6,784 men, compared to Germany's 62,000 tons and 3,039 casualties. 3 British battlecruisers lay on the ocean floor against 1 German pre-dreadnought. Yet strategically, Britain had won. The Royal Navy retained absolute control of the North Sea and the vital shipping lanes that sustained the Allied war effort. The German High Seas Fleet never again sought full-scale battle. Admiral Jellicoe faced criticism for excessive caution, but his restraint reflected enormous responsibility. Churchill later observed that Jellicoe was, quote, "the only man on either side who could have lost the war in an afternoon." One catastrophic mistake could have delivered the seas to Germany and changed history's course. Jutland marked the twilight of the dreadnought era. Though these massive battleships had defined naval power for a generation, their limitations were starkly revealed. The future belonged to submarines, aircraft carriers, and new forms of warfare that would make fleet engagements between battleships relics of a bygone age.